All right, I show that it's 2 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started now. My name is James Bridges, and I manage the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum lease auctions for Select Spectrum. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day today to join us. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box. If they're relevant to the current topic, I will stop and answer them. And if they're not relevant, or I think I'll answer them later, I may just hold it off to the end. So today we'll cover basic information about the 2.5 gigahertz licenses, including the FCC rules, the pros and cons of operating on 2.5 gigahertz spectrum, along with ways to obtain rights to these licenses. This is what the band plan looks like. It's a total of 194 megahertz, starting out at 2,496, all the way up to 2,690. Now the band is split into two different categories. The first is EBS, or Educational Broadband Service. EBS licenses make up about 5/8 of the band and can only be held by educational institutions or some nonprofits. Primarily though, they're all held by educational institutions such as colleges, universities, some school districts as well. The other category in this band is BRS licenses, or Broadband Radio Service. BRS licenses can actually be held by anyone, including commercial entities. The majority of these licenses are actually held by Sprint. And so a typical license is 4 channels, or 22.5 megahertz. Take, for example, the A channel block. You can see that channel A1, A2, and A3 are in the lower band and are 5.5 megahertz each for a total of 16.5. And then you'll see the other part of the license, A4, is in the middle band and is 6 megahertz, and that's what the 16.5 and the 6 is where we get the 22.5. Now it is possible in some areas to lease multiple licenses covering the same geographic area. For example, you could lease the A and B channel blocks. So that would equate to 33 megahertz of contiguous spectrum in the lower band and 12 megahertz in the middle band. So that is what the band looks like spectrally. Let's take a look at it geographically. This license is held by Parkland College and is actually included in our 2014 auction. Is located in Champaign, Illinois. The standard license is a circle with a 35-mile radius. But if you look at the blue circle on your screen, you'll see the geographic coverage of this particular license. And if you take a closer look at the southwest corner, you'll see it's not a complete circle. There's a portion of it missing. Basically that occurs because it bumped into another license and couldn't expand to fulfill the complete circle. So while some sections of the licenses may touch each other, there are parts of the country that are not covered by 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. It's actually about half the US. And there's been a push to expand coverage to the entire US. One of the possible ways to expand it is this red area this red area on your map is currently not licensed. And this is how this particular license would expand under the consensus proposal that is currently in front of the FCC. And the proposal essentially states that if the license touches a portion of a county, it will expand to cover the entire county unless it runs into another license's expansion. In places where there are no licenses, new applications would be accepted on a first-come, first-served basis. Obviously, the applicant must meet certain criteria. So for it to apply for an EBS license, it would have to be an educational institution or a nonprofit. It couldn't be a commercial entity, unfortunately. We feel that the goal of the consensus proposal is consistent with FCC goals to have more spectrum available. So we're hopeful that it'll be passed soon. It's actually been in front of the FCC for a number of years, and unfortunately they haven't done anything with it. And realistically speaking, we don't expect a lot to happen in between now and the election. We expect the election to occur, then a new chairman to be in the FCC, and then perhaps there'll be some movement on this proposal. So obviously there's a number of advantages of operating on licensed spectrum. One of the main advantages is just freedom from interference. There's also higher power levels and ability to provide non-line of sight service, which we believe results in lower operating costs, higher speeds, and ideally more satisfied customers. The standard equipment for 2.5 gigahertz is LTE and WiMAX. We've actually seen the cost of the equipment decreasing over the years, making it more affordable for operators to attain 2.5 gigahertz rights. And that's actually what's really spurred a lot of the growth and interest into this band. There's also actually what we call built-in financing. And what I mean by that is the FCC says that EBS licenses cannot be sold to commercial operators. Instead, they must be leased. So I don't know, a typical lease payment structure might include 10% up front and the other 90% of the lease paid out over a full 30-year lease. So that's what we mean by built-in financing. And that, I think that is advantageous to a lot of commercial operators, particularly the smaller ones that might have a high cost of capital or even a problem borrowing a significant amount of money up front. Also, so far, the AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile have not expressed interest in the 2.5 gigahertz band. They haven't leased or bought any of the licenses either. There's obviously a disadvantage as well. There's the cost of buying or leasing the licenses. The equipment is more expensive than unlicensed equipment, but that price gap is narrowing between the licensed and unlicensed equipment. Also, most licenses are only 22.5 megahertz, and some operators may want multiple licenses for optimal optimization. The biggest disadvantage right now is the licenses are not available everywhere. Like I said, about half the U.S. is not even licensed, and there's actually a number of licenses that are already leased, which we'll cover here in a little while. What you'll see though is there's more licenses available in rural areas than urban. And last but not least, when dealing with educational institutions, the lease negotiations typically go very slowly. To provide kind of a point of reference, we had an auction back in November of 2015, and we're still working on some of those deals to get through. A lot of them have closed, but there are some that have been held up, unfortunately. You know, the educational institutions, they have to submit it to their board to get approval. A lot of the time that can take some time. So Sprint is the major player in this band. They actually lease over 2,000 EBS licenses. But because of the declining cost of equipment that I mentioned earlier, we've seen more people enter into the band. Actually, according to our research, there are over 50 operators around the country that have acquired 2.5 gigahertz rights. These are not just speculators or different subsidiaries of other companies, but actual 50 separate entities that are operating on these licenses. There's a couple of rules that is unique to this band that the FCC has implemented. The first one is the FCC requires that part of the license, specifically 5%, is reserved for educational purposes. This is typically accomplished by giving the license holder a certain number of free devices that can be used on the network. And another thing is the FCC has said that any lease signed today has a maximum duration of 30 years. So now that we've kind of gone over the background information about the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum, I'd like to spend some time talking about how commercial operators can gain access to these licenses and what bidders should expect when entering our auctions. So we hold what we call spectrum lease auctions twice a year to facilitate these transactions. We hold one in the fall and one in the spring, where basically we sign up license holders and commercial operators to bid on these licenses and act as a secondary market after the FCC originally issued them. I should actually clarify that it's not really an auction. That's more of a marketing term that we use. It's not an open process like eBay where you know what the other person is bidding. It's a sealed process, and you may not know and you will not know what the other person is bidding actually. But So saying all of that, it's free to sign up for our auctions and select Spectrum, and we'll only collect a commission in the result of a successful transaction. So once the lease is signed and submitted and approved by the FCC, we'll collect our commission from the upfront payment to the license holders. So in order to participate, all we really need is a signed bidder agreement, and we'll grant you access to our secure auction site, which includes information about over 400 licenses that are available in the auction. So once you enter the auction, we'll actually hold another webinar later to give a live demonstration of the process to submit bids and actually value them, and we'll actually touch on that a little bit later today as well. But after the first bid date for the upcoming auction is scheduled, or the first bid date for the upcoming auction is scheduled for October 27th. And once we receive the first bids, we'll run our financial analysis and present the bids to the license holders. From there, the process is largely in the license holders' hands. They can ask for another round of bidding, accept an offer, reject all the offers. It'll be entirely up to them on how they like to proceed. I should also mention that the license holders that have signed up for us to market their licenses are not obligated to accept any offers, but our experience has shown that a competitive auction process makes it easier for schools, which are typically risk adverse, to accept an offer. To date, we've completed 83 transactions as a result of this process, and many more deals are actually in the negotiation phase. We hope to get a lot more done as well. In previous auctions, we've had over 120 bidders sign up. That resulted in 360 bids, and the bids range from less than 4 cents per megahertz pop to greater than 20 cents per megahertz pop. And we'll go over kind of how we got that valuation and everything here shortly. This is a map of the licenses that we've targeted and included in the auction. As you can see, and like I said earlier, the licenses unfortunately are just not available everywhere, but primarily where they are available is the rural areas. Now I'd like to spend a little bit briefly go over how to value a license. And for this particular example, we chose call sign WNC 709, which is held by the Van Alstyne Independent School District, which is located in Sherman, Texas, which is actually just north of Dallas. These licenses are valued on the megahertz pop valuation, which is the megahertz of the license, which in this case is 22.5, multiplied by the population. In this case, 183,000 for 4.1 million megahertz pops is what the Van Alstyne Independent School District license covers. So this spreadsheet is actually just kind of our standard guideline of what we use to value these licenses, and it's actually available on our website. We'll go over that here shortly. But the guidance that we provided for our bidders is 4 cents per megahertz pop for rural areas. Now these bids obviously varied greatly depending on a variety of factors, and really it's just you want to submit an offer that you feel that is fair and the school district will accept, because a lot of the time the educational institutions are very risk adverse and are hesitant to get involved in something that they feel future board members or something may frown upon them for. So once you download this spreadsheet, you'll enter the information that is available from our secure auction site into these green cells. So the 22.5 megahertz and the population of 183,000. In this blue cell, the price proposal can be adjusted. Right now it's set on the default of 4 cents per megahertz pop. So for this particular license, we could expect to see an upfront payment of $16,470. The initial monthly rent of $954 that would increase by 3% annually. So in year one, it would be $954. Year two would be $983. Over a 30-year lease, this would result in about $560,000 to the license holder. And our commission for these is the greater of $6,000 or 6% of the net present value. The net present value in this case, you can see in this yellow cell, is $164,286. So the 6% of that would be $9,857. Now this does not result in any additional money outside of this bid. We would actually take our commission out of the upfront payment. So the license holder would actually get $6,613 of the upfront payment, and then which is basically the difference of $16,470 minus $9,857. And then they would obviously receive the remaining monthly payments for the term of the lease. So as I said earlier, the first bids are due by October 27th, with signed agreements due by the 20th. Actually, on our website, the valuation spreadsheet and bidder agreements can be downloaded from there. selectspectrum.com/SLA. SLA is the Spectrum Lease Auction. And if you scroll down underneath the map, you'll see the bidder agreement is available for download, along with that Excel spreadsheet that helps you with creating the bid, which is called the Lease Net Present Value Calculator spreadsheet. There's some other information here as well, such as FAQ and an executive summary of just kind of our marketing process as well. Actually, there's handouts available on the webinar as well that has a summary of the bidder agreement and the FAQ if you'd like to download it from there as well. So from here, I'll take any questions now if anyone has any, or if they like, or if you think of something later, you're more than welcome to email me or call me with any questions that you have. Yeah, so as I said, the first bids will be due on the 27th of this month, and signed agreements are due by the 20th. Someone commented that it seems a little expensive. The values are going to vary depending on the population. That's pretty much the large factor. So that it all depends on where you operate, and that's going to affect the actual price of it. So someone actually asked also, what's the minimum upfront payment? The minimum upfront payment is 10% of the net present value, or $10,000, so the greater of the two. This is actually so after taking our commission, the license holders can have any extra money for attorney fees, legal fees, anything like that. Okay, no, I'm sorry. So the $164,000 is the net present value of the particular example. And here you go. I can load it just so we can look at it a little easier. So in this particular example, we said it was 183,000 population for the 22.5 megahertz. So the net present value is 164,000. But no, that's not up front. That is just what it would, I guess the easiest way, what it would be, all the future payments, what they're valued at today. So I hope that answered the questions. Yes, the 22.5 megahertz is the channel width. Okay, yeah, so from a cash, the question is from a cash basis, can you provide a better example? So that's what I loaded the spreadsheet for. In this particular example, the upfront payment would be the $16,470 with monthly payments of $954 for year one. or annual payment, we'll call it $11,000 just to make math a little easier. So in year one, you would pay $27,000. In year two, the upfront payment's gone, obviously, so you would just do the $11,790 or $983 a month. And these can be adjusted where you can just say you wanted to pay $12,000 every year and not have any increase. That can be adjusted as well. So it's really what you think the license holders will accept and what you think is actually going to be the highest bidder as well. So is there any more questions about the actual evaluation? And as I mentioned, actually you can adjust this to, you could change it to 5 cents and it would fill out the entire spreadsheet for you as well. Or if you wanted, you could change it to 3.5 cents. Whatever you feel like your company can afford and what you think will be accepted. And then from there, you could also change it. If, say, instead of a 3% annual increase, you could do, say, 1.5%, and it would adjust the spreadsheet there as well. So if there's not any more questions, I think, like I said, I'll put my information back up on the screen, and if anyone has any questions, anything that they think of later, they can shoot me an email or give me a call. And again, the last day to sign up for the auction is October 20th, and the first bid date will be October 27th. All right, thank you.